Now, quick check-in with the Mercuries, and it really will be a quick check-in with the Mercuries, because really there's not that much more to do on these now. It's just a case of getting those two, the front-end feature on both of them, rather. Just a case of getting that right. So I decided that there was too much build-up of modelling clay and putty on the front of the red one, so I did a bit of a demolition job and got it all chiselled off. It does seem like I've taken it right back to the start. I haven't at all. The central bit is untouched because that was the bit that I thought I'd got right. It was the fact that everything around it was it had just been built up too thick and a little bit undulating. I wanted to get the casting lines to be sharp and defined in the end result. So I've got rid of everything but those. Everything but the central bit, which is right. And then I'm just building that up. I'm just going to try building that up with normal Tamiya white. In fact, flat white it's called, but it's not the kind of flat white that you could order in Starbucks. Oh, you know, the patter on this channel is something else, isn't it? Yeah, so it's just white. I'm thinking, because it's quite thick, it might act as a bit of a build-up primer, because I don't want to use any actual build-up primer, if I can avoid it, because build-up primers kind of, I sort of think as that has been for real cars, really. It's a bit like a sledgehammer at cracking up. So I'm hoping that build-up primer can sand down nicely and leave the front of that one completely done. The gold one's still a way to go yet, to be fair. It's a case of just, I've had to take that right back to correct the actual direction, so to speak, of the central bit. But anyway, that is getting there still as well, because it is the kind of definition of the elongated V shape is back there again. But I thought, let's just do something fun, because this is such a nice fun colour, this on this 911. Like, it's like the inside of a Spirit level. But because I'd had to put it on quite thin in thin coats to keep it this colour and not end up with a dark green, it's not particularly glossy or shiny. So we're going to lacquer this now. So I've got the dreaded airbrush out again, and I'm just putting a few fairly dry coats on to start with. I mean, you don't have to put them on absolutely dry, but on the other hand, there's no point in putting them on too wet, because you can still risk runs. I mean, Tamiya clear lacquer's not bad for that sort of thing. I don't think I've ever actually had any run, but then again, that's because I try not to put it on too thick. Once you've got a nice dry coat on there, you can go back, be a bit bolder, and put I wouldn't say very wet, but put quite a wet coat like this on, just to get a bit of shine there, because you don't want to be trying to sand this thing. Well, sand, that's not something we really do with lacquer on these tiny cars, but you don't want to be there forever trying to get a shine up. You want the shine to be there already. The most I want to have to use on that thing is lapping film, and by the looks of it there, and indeed by the looks of it 24 hours later, I don't think I am going to have to use anything more than lapping film. So that little area where I accidentally made the divot while removing the remains of the tow bar on this, I've got that all sanded down, so the shape's there. But because I want to use a transparent colour, I'm hoping that if I just put a bit of silver on that, just at the end, that we'll get away with it. So here we go. Here's where we find out. Now again, I found red is a little bit similar to the lacquer in terms of it pays to put a bit of a misty coat on first, like quite a dry misty coat, and then go at it afterwards with more of a wet coat to get the colour defined, and also hopefully get it to dry to the kind of finish. Because if you're just using undiluted red, because red is the most translucent, well, the most transparent out of all the colours. I mean, every red paint under the sun is transparent, is slightly transparent to some degree. Even like a pot of Dulux red paint that's for doing barn doors with, if you put white undercoat under it and then put grey undercoat under a section of it, you will notice a slightly different shade of red. So all red paint lets the light through. So when you're talking about a transparent red that's designed to let the light through, it really is going to let the light through. Now the point of all that was to say that it's not quite as critical to not put too much on with red as it is with the other colours. Blue, if you put too much on, in no time at all, you're going to go past the colour that you want and go to a darker one. Unless you were trying to get to a darker colour, in which case, yeah, keep putting it on. But if you're wanting a nice light blue or a mid blue and you're using transparent blue, you've really got to be careful how much you put on there. So it does pay to use the light dusty coats and not worry about the shine, because you can sort the shine out with the lacquer, because the lacquer is transparent and that will not ruin your colour. Green's similar to a degree, probably not quite as bad as blue, but it's still bad for it. That's why I was so careful with the 911. But this thing, red, you don't really have to worry about it because it takes a long time before. To get this to like being a really dark red that we don't want, we're going to have to put probably more paint on than I've got. So I can keep going with this and put glossier and glossier and wetter and wetter coats on, and just get it to the point where I probably won't need to do anything with this once it's dried, because it will just dry nice and glossy. Because all the transparent Tamiya colours, they are to a degree their own lacquer. It's just that you've got to, in order for them to act like that, you've got to put them on like lacquer, i.e. put it on dry first and then put a wet coat on to get you the shine. And with the green and the blue, you don't really want to do that unless you want a dark transparent green or a dark transparent blue, because otherwise you'll just end up, like I said before, if you actually treat it as a lacquer and put that many coats on, you'll kind of go past the colour that you wanted. So we're benefiting here from it being done in the cellar where there's fluorescent lights on, because the kind of effect that you get from the polished metal with transparent paint on, it really does kind of come alive under transparent lights. It's best looked at in direct sunlight or just indoors with indoor lighting. That's when you get the most kind of spectacular effect. It does look nice. I didn't actually mirror polish this one completely. I stopped at maybe about 400 grit on that. And there's not much difference between how it would be if I'd completely mirror polished it right to the end. But there is a subtle difference there in terms of how the light plays across the metal. So this is ideal opportunity to show the difference between a candy over a base colour and candy straight onto bare metal. You can just see how the light plays across the metal across the surface in different ways, because on the green one there's paint under there, there's silver paint under there, like metallic paint, so little tiny flakes of metal. And on that there's just bare shiny metal underneath there. You don't, like I say, this time of year, with there being no sun particularly, you don't really see the effect unless you've got it inside. Anyway, it's alright getting a nice fancy colour on this thing, but there's a lot of work to do with this still. If you remember last time, there was still that area where I'd filled the back bumper, but there was still that little area where you could see, once the body was back on, there was a little bit of a gap. So the trick here is to get a tiny little bit of filler on there. I'm hoping that'll kill two birds with one stone, because I've sanded that white down that I put on there, and it's more or less there, but there's still a couple of little bits that could just do with filling over again, just to make the whole thing a bit smoother. So I'm putting this bit of filler on there to hopefully fill that gap, so that there won't be that visible gap on the top of the bumper when it's put back together, and also add another layer of smoothing out, so to speak, with the back bumper. It's quite tricky. You've just got to wet the little bit of modelling clay and just keep playing about with it, and then obviously keep putting something round like this file through it to make sure we've still got that hole for the rivet to go all the way through cleanly without catching on it. And to use a fancy highbrow term for a second, you've got 3 vertices that you're working with here, because you don't want too much of the modelling clay to go over the original hole that the rivet's got to go through. But then you've also got to get it smooth on the back, the facet of the bumper that's facing you when you're looking at the back of the car, and then also the top edge of the bumper. But then actually, no, in a way there's 4 vertices, because you've got the underneath to worry about as well. I mean, I've got a bit more on there. There's a little bit more on the underneath than there really needs to be. That's fine. It doesn't matter. You can get overhang as much as you want, as long as you don't get any overhang where that rivet hole's got to be. You can get excess anywhere else you want, because it will sand off in seconds. Das modelling clay sands off in seconds. You're always better off with a little bit too much than a little bit. That was the tripod partially collapsing into the midst of some of the cars. I thought I'd leave it in because it's quite relevant, or it could have been very relevant, because it nearly hit the Renault and the Porsche, and it would have definitely scratched the paint if it had done that. But it didn't. It actually just landed on. It actually landed more on some tools and things like that than anything else. It sounded a lot worse than it really was. Anyway, this is the 911. We're just detailing in here the headlights and the rear lights. So everything else, where we've exposed the sort of bare metal and polished it to make this sort of chrome bumper effect, that'll all stay preserved under the lacquer now. So that's fine. It won't tarnish or anything like that. So that's another benefit to lacquering it. So the Molotow liquid chrome pen that I've got, it's suffered from a malady, but that doesn't mean it can't still be used, because the important stuff that's in there is the liquid chrome itself. So it can still do the thing where you kind of press it down to let some of the chrome ink, so to speak, out. So I just do that onto like a plastic surface that gives me a small amount of the liquid chrome, and then just apply it with a cocktail stick. It works just as well, if not better. I think you can be slightly more accurate with a sharpened cocktail stick than you can be using the nib of a pen. So it's not affected it in any way, shape or form, really. I mean, if you ask the Molotov pen itself whether it's affected, well, yes, it is, because it's broken. But in terms of its use, it's not affected at all. In fact, like I say, it's probably slightly better. So it's just a matter of feeding the chrome into these little slots that are there for the rear lights. The real hard part with this, I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's massively easy to get it just into those little tiny slots for the lights without going onto the bit in between the light and the bumper that's meant to be still green. So I do manage to keep that green, but that's a little bit difficult because you don't want the backlights to look like they're sort of crying into the back bumper. That's not an effect that we really want to, or melting into the back bumper. So this is the Mercury where it stands now. I've sanded it down a little bit. It's looking good. The central part, the central feature, that's obviously not looking that good yet because we need to build it back up. This, don't be fooled by where the red stripe's going. I know it looks for a second like I've managed to get the thing horribly wrong. It's not. The V-shaped feature itself doesn't actually follow that stripe, and it is still a V-shaped feature. I've got a feeling that when I come to sand that's actually going to be perfect, and that'll be that done. Green Porsche just needs a light setting and one or two other little bits. The Renault 5 needs quite a bit more doing to it, as you can see here. But join me next time, and we might actually get one of these finished off. Thanks for watching.